able to go visit with folks on Capitol Hill, and when we do that, they know that we're not just talking about ideas that we've come up with in the DC office, that we're in fact speaking on behalf of all of you, and all of you are speaking up on behalf of millions of train riders all across the country. It really does give us the strength and the credibility to carry our message. And I think the thing I would like to leave you with tonight, and before Sean takes you through the details, is we're in a different place than we were even 5 years ago, let alone 20 years ago. We're not having to have a conversation on Capitol Hill anymore about Amtrak's right to exist, about passenger rail's right to exist. What we are is we're winning. Our message is resonating, our message is getting through, and our message is winning. And so as this reauthorization cycle kicks off, we need to figure out how to use our new muscle here to really shape the conversation further the way we want to. There's some really important things coming up, some deadlines coming up. We have a very short window in which to operate this year because of the presidential election. Sean will go through it with you in more detail, but with the elections coming up, what we're likely to see is that anything meaningful is going to have to get done before the end of June, because after that, they're going to flip off the lights and go be involved in campaigns. So we do have a short window, but at the same time, we have some tremendous opportunity. We have a lot of support. Our coalition in the Senate remains very strong. 94 senators are pretty reliably going to vote along our interests now, which is great. We're in a different place, and we are able to leverage some of our strength in ways that we've not been able to do previously. And so Sean has new powers that you have given him by your active participation. And so it's important that we're all on the same page, that we're all delivering the same message, and that we're sticking to this script because this is what's going to resonate in Congress, and it's going to move us forward in reauthorization. I don't want to steal any of Sean's thunder, so I'm going to let him go through the details. But this has really been a solid effort from everyone, and we're in a great place. So take a bow and then roll up your sleeves and let's get going. Over to you, Sean.
Thank you, Jim. Again, I'm going to try to keep everyone muted. I apologize for that. Probably the beeping you hear in the background. It's people trying to log on. They don't really make web platforms for people as dedicated as ours at a price we can afford. So again, thank you to everyone for logging on tonight. I'm going to try to get through a lot of information quickly. Someone asked, will we be able to send out this slide presentation as a PDF via email? And the answer is yes. So you don't worry about taking notes or anything. This will all be sent to you later, and you can review it at your leisure. I'm also recording tonight's webinar, so hopefully we can link that to people who weren't able to make it either through schedule or technical difficulties. All right, so hopefully everyone can see my screen. I'm going to start at the hopefully everyone can see that. Jim's right. We have really done a pretty, I think, excellent job of making sure that people are hearing the message they need to hear. I've been doing this for about 10 years, and it's really kind of night and day in terms of me going into a congressional office, and instead of me having to start from the kind of the ground floor and explain what passenger rail is, what Amtrak is, and why it's important, people kind of understand now that we can't pave our way out of this. Highways are not the only transportation system the U.S. needs, and passenger rail is going to play a big part of it. Some of that, I think, in large part, is due to the work we've done as an association. When Amtrak put a target on Southwest Chief. We responded forcefully, and we responded with a study that it took some resources, but we were able to find 180 million annual benefits to the 3 states that Amtrak was proposing limiting service to. We won that fight. Rail passengers also did a study on the second daily frequency between Chicago and Minneapolis, St. Paul. It's garnered a lot of interest. A study is moving ahead on that. We did it for the Empire Builder again when Amtrak identified that route as one of the ones that maybe part of their future plan for the network going forward. It got a lot of communities on the line, very enraged and organized and active, and it got a lot of members of the congressional delegation to make sure that we're not getting noise in the backgrounds. All right. The screen is blank. All right. I apologize to everyone. You're just going to have to listen to the sound of my voice, and I'm going to send this out later. I'm not going to try to fix this on the fly because it would probably just waste everyone's time, and I wouldn't be able to do it. Is that better? Can people see that?
Yes.
Okay. Well, so hopefully that's better. I haven't skipped by anything of too much note. I was just going to launch into one of our most recent victories, which was the Gulf Coast Restoration. We did a in conjunction with Transportation America, the Southern Rail Commission. We did a huge campaign, a big push, and we just got the vote we needed in Alabama, so that they're going to move ahead with restoring the first segment of the Gulf Coast, which has been knocked out since Hurricane Katrina in 2005. So again, the work we're doing is paying off. The work you're doing is paying off. I know sometimes the United States is such a big ship, it feels like it takes a long time to move, but we're doing well. I will say it's good that we're doing well because we got some bad news coming from the White House a week ago. Their FY 2021 budget proposal called for the elimination of Amtrak's long-distance trains. It's a $689 million cut. They called for quote-unquote transformation grants to replace Hendrik just said I'm fading in and out, so I apologize for that. Again, I think we're over capacity here, but hopefully everyone keep up. The Northeast Corridor was also cut by $375 million, so this wasn't completely focused on the rural services and the long distance services. Pretty even-handed. I think we have a really good coalition to fight this back, but it's important that we speak up. That's why your work has been fantastic. Response within a week. We've got over 2,800 messages, and in fact, in under a week, this being Tuesday night, to 96 U.S. senators and 423 representatives, and those are really great numbers. That's almost universal coverage. So, I mean, for us, that's going to be a huge part. If you have not taken part in this campaign, please go to railpassengers.org/action to take part. If you have, spread it around to your friends via social media, via Facebook. We really want to get to 10,000 messages by the time the appropriators are looking at this. So we're gonna need your help, but I think we have a really, really good chance of shutting this down before it even gets started. We're 3 for 3 in the past 3 years with these White House proposals, and we've already heard from several Republican leaders on the Hill that they plan to stick with the budget agreement, the 2-year budget agreement, of which we are in the 2nd year. Which means good things for transportation, means good things for Amtrak. But again, if you're not at the table you're on the menu. We don't know what the election's going to bring this fall, so it's important that we maintain that bipartisan consensus that passenger rail is a necessary investment. Moving forward to the FY 2021 Amtrak grant and legislative request. As is required by law, Amtrak within a week of the White House releasing their budget proposal has to come out with theirs. Again, this was kind of the inversion of this. I think we have not reported on this because it wasn't released till 7 p.m. on Friday, so it was after the hotline, and that kind of makes me nervous usually when there's that kind of Friday night dump. However, upon the initial review, the numbers are good. Amtrak seems to have learned at least some sort of lesson from Congress's kind of beating them up over their messaging about the long distance routes and how they don't see a future for them. So, national network grants, 1.33 billion. They specifically identified track improvements for the Southwest Chief of around 5 million. So they're living up to that side of the bargain. We're seeing 714 million for the NEC. So that's all in all, it's 2 billion. It's over 2 billion for the traditional counts. I think that's a good thing. And it tells us that Amtrak is kind of reading the writing on the wall. They're reading the anger from congressional offices who've been frankly pretty pissed off. Again, thanks to a lot of your work to raise the alarm about some of these suggestions. They also introduced something called the Corridor Development Program. This is a new account where Amtrak would get $300 million this year to launch new services. There was, I don't know if you read our hotline, Rail Passengers, but we kind of targeted a story where Amtrak gave a presentation about reintroducing frequent Amtrak service to Nashville from Chicago. So these are the kind of state-supported services that they've talked about, and it's good to know that again they're hearing our message, which is we're not against new service. We in fact support new state-supported services, but it can't come on the back of long distance customers, long distance passengers. So they're saying, I think, in this budget request, okay, we've heard you. We will maintain existing services and build out on top of that, and that's a good thing. And it's thanks to your work. Fleet plan updates. That's going to be a lot of. There's going to be a lot of good news. They've identified over $2 billion for in FY 2021 using existing funding sources authorized by Congress to spend on new equipment. Some of that will be from revenue. Some of that will be federal legislative grants. That includes over $1 billion for national network refleeting. So again, this is good news, and it says maybe they're finally beginning to hear what members of Congress, what their customers are telling them. That includes Superliner and Amfleet 2 replacements. That does not include. They've identified additional equipment needs. Superliner and Amfleet 2 replacements at $2 billion, diesel locomotive replacements at $1.5 billion, and additional fleet for the corridor development, which I already talked about, at just over $500 million. I'm hearing some questions via chat. I will try to address these kind of at the end. So feel free to just plug them in. And Joe Aiello, if you could just keep track of the questions and feed them to me via Slack, that would be super helpful. So again, they're kind of identifying what it would take to maintain the national network at existing levels, improve that service, because as we all know, the main constraint is not demand, but supply for a lot of these routes. and they're finally coming out and just saying, okay, Congress, it's up to you to provide the additional funding if you want to see these routes sustained. And this is good for us because it gives us a hunting license. So again, I said Amtrak has learned a lesson from 2 years of unforced PR blunders. Um, it remains to be seen whether they've learned the right lesson. If I'm an optimist, I'm saying okay that they've been beaten up enough by Congress. They've heard from Congress that they're pissed off. They don't want to hear any more of this talk about eliminating long distance routes. There's a big enough coalition, specifically in the Senate, but it's a bipartisan coalition against eliminating any existing services, that they're just going to toe the line. If I'm a pessimist, I'm going to say that they just realized that a frontal assault is not the right strategy, and they're going to try to do something else, perhaps a little bit more, a more subtle strategy towards phasing some of these routes out. I think we're going to have to kind of wait and see. Not trust but verify is a phrase that our chairman Peter Lucotti likes to use, and I think that's kind of where we're at right now. They gave us the right document, but we need to watch them like a hawk, and we need to work with our congressional allies to ensure that there is the right amount of oversight. We won't know for sure until Amtrak releases its reauthorization blueprints, which we haven't seen yet, and we're going to talk more as we go through this briefing. So moving on to the concept of infrastructure week and an infrastructure bill. I think it's really been taken up a notch. It's something that has been very much on top of everyone's mind, at least since President Trump was first elected. It's always kind of been that second tier of, once we get past the Republican tax cuts or whatever recent healthcare crisis is affecting us as a country, we're going to get to infrastructure. But the fact that we're coming into a general election and there's very few areas of bipartisan agreement outside of infrastructure has really refocused everyone. We've seen the most recent kind of salvo was from House Democrats, where they unveiled a 5-year, $760 billion infrastructure framework that included $55 billion for rail. That's $11 billion a year across 5 years, and $105 billion for public transit, or $21 billion per year. So those are both obviously for rail specifically. That is a huge increase. That's a huge increase in funding, and it poses challenges in how we would spend it out. But it's really heartening to hear the House of Representatives come out with this kind of ambition, and we're going to hear more about that in a hearing coming in March, which we'll talk about again later. The Senate Environment and Public Works has released their highway bill earlier in 2019. It was a 27% increase over current spending levels. We haven't seen what they're going to do for transit and rail. We're going to hear it hopefully this spring, and we are counting on them to maintain that same kind of magnitude of increase. So something that is a significant increase over current spending levels. We've also seen from the White House. White House wants to increase spending. Unfortunately, they have not said they want to increase spending on rail specifically. But the Democratic Party presidential primary have definitely come out and said this is something they want to pursue. They had a infrastructure hearing in Las Vegas on Sunday evening, and Amtrak was definitely Amtrak and high speed rail. Both were targeted by every participating candidate, and that's Klobuchar, Biden, Pete Buttigieg, and Tom Steyer. So they all talked about the necessity for at least high-speed rail. I know Klobuchar specifically mentions how important the Empire Builder is to the communities up in her neck of the woods. So it just goes to show you we have to be ready for this. When the dam breaks, we're not going to be able to predict it. We just know that there eventually is going to be a heck of a lot of money coming down the chute, and we have to be ready for our priorities to make sure the passenger rail gets the money we need, but also that that the right projects are funded. So, what does the clock look like? Unfortunately for us, since this is a reauthorization year and there's a lot to be done, we're going to be working with a very compressed congressional calendar. February 28th, which is coming up very quickly here, and we're going to talk more about this on the last slide when I give you some quick actions you can take to help passenger rail in your region. But that's the appropriations deadline for member offices. March 3rd will be Super Tuesday for it'll only be for the Democratic primary candidates, because obviously President Trump is going to handily lock up the Republican nomination. At some point, I believe it's going to be the first week of March, we will hear another House T&I rail title hearing. If I can go full screen without making it go white, I will try for the slides. Steve K is asking. Give me just a minute. All right. I don't know that. Yeah, I apologize, but I can't make it full screen without making the screen go white. So again, I will send this out as a PDF, and we will try for the next webinar to make sure that everyone has this in their hands beforehand, so we don't have to rely on this technology. So thank you for everyone for their patience. Okay. The first week of March, the House T&I rail title hearing. We're going to hear transportation and infrastructure. Transportation and infrastructure through the committee, where they're going to we're going to talk with Amtrak, they're going to talk with Host Railroad, probably some labor. We're going to get our questions inserted. I'm not sure that they've already gone to us in the last 2 months, so they may not go back to us again. But what they're going to want to talk about is, okay, if we gave you $11 billion a year, how would you spend it? And so again, the onus is on us to kind of come to them and say, here are the projects in our neighborhood that are worth funding. Obviously, we could spend $11 billion a year on the Northeast Corridor or the California high-speed rail, and leave nothing for anyone else. That's a bad political program. It's not what you want to do if you're trying to get a successful multi-year reauthorization, where you want everyone to kind of feel like they have some skin in the game. So I think we have a role to play. I also, so once we move past that hearing, I think it will kick reauthorization into high gear. However, if previous calendars have any kind of predictive power, by late June, we are going to see a lot of people just head for the door and go back and try to get reelected. Again, this is general election. They're going to have a bunch of recesses. July 13, August 24th, we're going to have Democratic and Republican primaries. Party conventions. Again, hopefully infrastructure is a part of those events. But then even bigger than that, September 30th, the FAST Act will expire and FY 2020 Budget Act expires. So if Congress doesn't find a solution for the FY 2021 budget, we'll have government shutdown. If they can't come up with a reauthorization, they will lose the statutory ability to collect gas taxes, which means state highway departments and metropolitan transit agencies, they lose funding really quickly. And that is not the kind of thing that you want to do as an incumbent member of Congress before a big election. So they're going to be very incentivized to find some sort of solution. I expect they will be short-term solutions, and that we will be talking about either a few weeks or a few months, or in case of reauthorization, sometimes it can just be a kicking the can down the road for a year. So you might ask yourself, does this, if there's not a good chance for the FAST Act's replacement to kind of get passed into law by October 1st, should we really spend a lot of time and effort altering what will be a bill that is never really going to get passed into law? We've talked to important committee staffers, and their messages. The bill that gets passed this year in draft form, even if it's not eventually the final legislation that gets signed by the president, it's going to be like 80 to 90% of what we see as the final form. So it's very important that we make sure our priorities are at the table during this drafting process this year, because again, it probably won't get passed into law, but when the new Congress and either President Trump will get elected or we'll have a new president in the White House, they're going to come back January 1st, 2021. They're going to take this draft bill off the shelf and they're going to try to get it done really quickly. And they're not going to be in a mood to go revisit all the arguments that we've been having this year. So again, these are important conversations we're having now. You can find all this at railpassengers.org/blueprint. A lot of what we have there was developed with input from our council, from our members. We had listening sessions over the last 18 months. And we've been, even as late as this month, we've been busy revising this and incorporating input from our members to make sure your views are heard in this. But essentially, it's talking about sustainable service on the national network, and really moving us through statutory language, clarify the fact that it's not up to Amtrak, it's not up to any individual senator or member of Congress to decide who gets service on any given appropriation cycle. It's really about much like the National Highway Network. These are the lines, and we're gonna enshrine that in statute so we can focus on bigger things, on making sure we have better service, not making sure we have any service at all. We want to fix the host-operator relationship. That means addressing on-time performance and fairness. That means figuring out how, through a shared use advisory committee, we can allow new services to take place without getting held hostage. Anyone who's followed the Gulf Coast restoration saga knows, CSX, they came back with for one train a day to Mobile, they said it'll cost you $2 billion. That's how much it took to get the Mars rover from Earth to Mars. So again, this is it's about making sure we can get more trains on these routes in a cost-effective way. And of course, the biggest thing, and I see some people in the questions, rebuilding the fleet is going to be a huge issue. It's pressing. A huge percentage of the equipment that we currently ride on is past its useful lifespan. And domestic rail manufacturing capabilities are unfortunately dormant right now. We have Siemens in Sacramento, we have Alstom in New York, New Rochelle, and of course CAF has had a lot of problems. but we don't have a lot of latent capability to just kind of ramp up. So it's important that we make sure we have predictable dedicated funding to equipment specifically, so that we can have the kind of domestic rail capabilities that we prize in for instance aviation manufacturing. This is our funding table. We don't want to make sure we get so distracted by the long-term vision that we forget we have very near-term pressing funding requirements. Northeast Corridor Capital, National Network Equipment. These were, we put a lot of thought into these, and so we didn't want to necessarily just erase them at the drop of the hat when the House Democrats unveiled their $11 billion per year proposal. We're going to revisit them, and we're going to talk with the council and the board about it. I think this is a much more realistic spend path, but at the same time, I do not want to kind of come up and be asking for half as much as the House is willing to give us for passenger rail. It's just not a good look, and it shows kind of a lack of a lack of ambition. So stay tuned for this. This was again developed over 18 months, and we looked at what we currently are spending and what we thought would be a realistic ramp up. But it's not final, and it won't be finalized along with the blueprint until we're really looking to get locked in by our day on the Hill. And for printing purposes, that means probably early March, we're going to try to have everything kind of finalized so that we're all singing from the same hymnal. Okay. So it's been half an hour. I want to leave time for Q&A. I'm getting a lot of questions that I'm going to have. It looks like you guys have been having conversations, and I'll try to see if I can catch up for that. But there's a couple near-term asks that I would make of you guys. The first one is about FY 2021. We do want to, again, make sure that we are vocal in opposition to the White House Amtrak cuts. And we also want to make sure that the funding opportunities in our regions are being highlighted to the key members of Congress. So the first one, securing near-term funding for Amtrak and passenger rail. There is a Dear Colleague letter that we've been working with Representative Seth Moulton from Massachusetts on. They have not finalized the draft, the text language. They're still working on the draft. As soon as they have finalized it, we will get it out to everyone. But if you could go to your House members who represent you and say and reference by name the Dear Colleague letter for the House Appropriations Transportation Subcommittee, FY 2021, led by Representative Seth Moulton of Massachusetts, and say we want you to support that. That would be a huge get. They're really looking to do a bipartisan bill, or bipartisan letter rather. It'll go to Representative Price and Representative Diaz-Balart of the Appropriations Committee, Subcommittee on Transportation. And so they are looking to us and asking for our help to make sure that we whip the vote on this. And again, this we'll send this. We have the text for this in the page I'm about to link you to, and as soon as the letter is finished, we'll get that to you. Right now, we have enough to kind of go off. Second, 1B, reach out to your representative before December 28th and identify any key passenger rail transit projects that you want to see funded. That's the deadline for the House member appropriation submissions. It's a little harder because we don't have earmarks anymore, but it's still something that you could submit to the committee, and it will help in grant applications, and it will help kind of provide the rationale for the funding level, top line funding levels. The number two Number two request of your time is share our briefing documents. Right now we have three, and you can find it over at railpassengers.org/railnation2020. Again, when we send out the follow-up email, when we send out this PDF, you'll have a link to it. But there's three documents. Two of them were developed by the council members. I want to give special thank you to George Chilson and Doug Kerr. They had a week on the Hill for the first week of February. I think it's the second inaugural. It's kind of a kickoff to the legislative season, and it comes before it's like not quite a dry run, but a introductory run for some of the council members before our official day on the Hill. And they developed a lot of these assets to kind of identify specific things that they were hearing from some of their fellow council members. And you can find them all there. They did a really good job. They got a lot of coverage, and they said the feedback was good. At a lot of the offices, it was new information about Amtrak's accounting services, the way capital works versus operating on the national network. And so these are going to be, I think, useful handouts. We also have just kind of a shortened version of our reauthorization blueprint that's a little easier, I think, to go through than the 30-page version of the document. Finally, we're 6 weeks out from the Day on the Hill, Rail Nation DC 2020. So now is the good time to kind of get on the radar for your Senate offices and your House offices, letting them know if you're going to participate. This year, we're going to try to have people, even if you're not in DC, even if you can't come or your schedule doesn't allow, we want you talking to your in-district offices. So that could mean going to if you live in Wichita, Kansas, you can go see your congressman, your senator in Kansas, and talk to them about the Heartland Flyer and the Flyer extension. We just, as long as we do it, Rail Passengers kind of week on the Hill, and we're doing it nationally. We want your help. Of course, if you're coming to DC, that's all the better. It's these fly-in days are really important for our coalition. And so now is the time when you reach out and you tell your elected officials about FY 2021, about the molten sign-on letter. When you share these documents, just let them know, hey, March 31st, it's our Day on the Hill. Would love to get on your calendar. Would love to talk to the member, to your boss if possible. If not, we'd love to talk to you. And then let us know about it. We've set up a meeting submission form. It's pretty easy. We just using Google. It should be pretty bang, but we have less staff than we did last year, so it's important that we maximize our resources and kind of draw on your help. We've utilized TJ Gersh's excellent guide to the Day on the Hill for beginners. And it's giving you some resources, a letter that you can use as a template to reach out. So we've made it very easy. Again, you can just go to railpassengers.org/railnation2020, find all these resources. And that is it. I'm going to turn it over. We still have enough time, I think, for maybe 15, 20 minutes of questions. I don't know that I will be able to answer all of them off the top of my head. I can promise you that if you submitted these, even if I have to go do some research tomorrow and send them out in written format, I will do my best to make sure we're getting to all of those. So, Joe, I don't know if you could unmute yourself and share some of these questions. I'll also try to go read through some of what I heard. One of the ones that was emailed to me beforehand was George from Florida, who asked, does Amtrak freight shipping, did it make money, and do we see that as an avenue for kind of eliminating some of the operating losses? I would have to do more research onto the state of Amtrak Express shipping. My instinct is that given the logistics kind of arms race and what Amtrak is doing, it's not going to be a good idea for Amtrak to invest a lot of resources in trying to get same day shipping or commit in that space. And I think, frankly, what we opened this briefing with is Amtrak's not supposed to make money. Amtrak makes money for the communities it serves, the states it serves, and it generates money for the U.S. economy. We see that very clearly with California Northeast Corridor, Chicago hub. We don't see it. We don't recognize it, even though it's there for a bunch of rural communities, which is, again, why we're trying to bring a more sophisticated analytical tool so we can go to places like Cut Bank, Montana, and say, in Montana generally, and say, this is what the Empire Builder does for your state, and it's worthwhile, and it doesn't necessarily make money at the ticket box to be worthwhile. Okay. Any other questions? I see one. That Jim highlighted. How much are you working with state and regional groups in orchestrating a consistent message to Congress during the reauthorization? How you responded to that? Joe, can you just read out some questions to me? I'm having trouble kind of keeping track of the wall.
Yeah, I'm here, Sean. So I've got a couple of questions from the chat and put them in Slack for us. But a question that came up is any movement on S2922, the Rail Passengers, the acts, the Fairness Act.
Rail Passengers Fairness Act. Yes, Senator Durbin. We're hopefully going to have, right now, the answer is no. They're kind of waiting for the Senate Commerce Committee to move ahead with the rail title of the Surface Transportation Reauthorization. The good news is it seems pretty well codified. It's consensus point of view that the rail title will be part of the Surface Transportation Reauthorization. And I think Durbin has an ally in Chairman DeFazio on the House side, who has directly told host railroads, if you don't fix this, we will. I think the trouble is we're going to need to find a Republican co-sponsor, and we have not done that yet. We've had some people who understand that it's a problem. They understand that on-time performance needs to be addressed. They are leery of this degree of regulation from the federal level. And so we still need to work on them. So, as you raise that with, especially if you have any Republican senators who you have relationships with, it's important that we get some bipartisan movement on it. And that's kind of where we're at right now.
Another question that came in quite early is there capital funding in place for the Amfleet 1 replacements given the RFI has been out to vendors?
Let me see if I can find this. Again, it was released Friday night. So right now, Joe, the question was, is there any capital allocated for the Amfleet 1 replacements?
Yes.
Yeah. So Amtrak has budgeted within the across the FY20 to FY 2025, $1.2 billion for Amfleet 1. The majority of that will be for state-supported services, and they're still short of the $2 billion needed. But as of right now, $540 million will be coming from the NEC accounts. $624 million would be coming from the state-supported account. $36 million for the long distance. So they're still about $800 million short of for the Amfleet 1 replacement program. I would assume they would go through some of the grant programs. Of course, if we have an infrastructure push, that could all be moot. The Superliner and Fleet 2 replacements, again, they've targeted $2 billion, but right now they don't have any money budgeted for it. They just know this is what it's going to cost, and they're looking to Congress to supply funds above and beyond the authorized amounts.
Another question was, are we concerned that the funding for new state-supported corridors is really kind of just a backdoor method for eventually declaring long-distance services obsolete? Is there anything we can kind of fight that off?
Well, it's a good question, and it's kind of what I tried to address it in that slide. Is Amtrak has learned a lesson here, but it hasn't learned the right lesson. I don't know. My antenna are up right now just because you'd have to be kind of blind or deaf or dumb or some combination of all three to have gone through the last 2 years of Amtrak executive decision making and not be highly skeptical of some of their motives around the long distance trains. I think we have a real opportunity here to leverage their request for additional funds for new state-supported services and say, okay, Amtrak, you want more money to launch new services? We will give you new money, but we're going to put some strings. We're going to attach some strings to it. And one of the strings we attach is saying all existing services must continue to be served at existing levels. And it's something that we have heard positive responses from at least the House side. The Senate side is a little bit more circumspect. They haven't said that they don't like it, but they haven't said they like it either. However, we do know that when we had that sense of the Congress last year, we had 94 senators voting in favor of a resolution that said long distance trains are important to rural America. They're important to America, and we should continue to fund them. So I think that you're right to be suspicious, and I think it's going to be one of those things where we don't leave it up to Amtrak management. We find a legislative solution and rely on a coalition to kind of take care of us there.
Another question came in. Sorry, I'm just looking to scroll. Last year's Day on the Hill, one of the speakers spoke about a possibility of an infrastructure bank. Has there been any movement or other offers on that?
I would have to get back to you. Honestly, it's not been on my radar. It is something that is always someone somewhere is definitely thinking like I have the infrastructure bank proposal that will finally get us there. But it's not top of the list. So we'll have to get back to you on that. I do know that we are looking at something that I think is better than the infrastructure bank for rail, which is improved funds. And Jim and Joe will be traveling. Jim Matthews and Joe Aiello will be traveling up to New Hampshire to go to a bill unveiling for Representative Kuster, who we helped develop a RIF Improvement Act. And they're going to use credit risk premiums to kind of unlock some of the $35 billion in subsidized loans for passenger rail, which right now is kind of sitting fallow, unfortunately. But I think it's a good sign that we were able to finally work with an office to kind of attack it, and I think we have a pretty good chance of getting that across the line, at least on the House side. Anything else, Joe?
I'm going through some of the other questions. Not entirely sure if you can actually answer this one, but Adrian in New Mexico said some of the contacts have been mentioning that Amtrak could be partnering with the local DOT for applying for grants on the Raton Pass. Is there any way we can actually look into verifying this?
Yeah, Adrian, if you could reach out to me correctly. I will have to probably chase that down through some local sources. I don't know. Jim Stubbe is probably going to be from Colorado. I will reach out to him because he's been Johnny on the spot for a lot of this stuff, and of course, I will see if I can figure out to what degree that 4.9 million is associated with the with their FY19 obligations. But no, we will try to follow up directly, Adrian.
And one of the last questions I found is Ed was asking, when would our blueprint for the 2020 ask for reauthorization be finalized?
Yeah, I'm hoping first to second week of March. Again, we want everything kind of locked in by the time everyone meets together on Passenger Day on the Hill, March 31st. And that puts us, I mean, we've been at a discussion draft level way ahead of everyone. Everyone's kind of finalized. I was hoping really to see Amtrak's draft version before we finalize ours. They may not let us do that. But APTA just released theirs last week, and One Rail Coalition released theirs last week as well, at least internally. I don't think they've done it publicly. So we're right on track, but we've been in touch with offices for the last 18 months. So we're ahead of the curve, but at some point we need to cut bait on some of our more ambitious proposals that just aren't getting traction. And it sucks because they're our babies. We spent a lot of time developing the ideas. We think they're good ideas, but at some point, if someone tells you this is just dead on arrival, you kind of have to look at the staff size, look at our association, our relative membership roles, and just figure out. Okay, it's time to focus on the achievable. And so that's going to hurt, but I think we'll be done by early March.
I think that I might have missed a question or two in the scroll, but there's been a lot of great conversation. But I think that actually wraps it up for questions I found.
Yeah, I saw Ronald said no news about passenger rail between New England and Quebec. What is the status of revising the Montrealer? President Obama made agreement. Prime Minister Trudeau to have customs in the Montreal station. What can we do to promote the Montrealer? Good question. I know there was an agreement. That was formed between the State Department and the Canadian version of the State Department, and I have not heard anything since then. I believe the money was appropriated for the customs infrastructure. So I will try to follow up. And see where we're at. I'm sure someone at the local level probably has been tracking it a little bit more closely than I have, but again, we'll try to send that out. That might take a little research, so we might not get it out to you tomorrow, but we will try to send something out probably within a week for some of these more in-depth questions. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. It's 9:30. And it is 9:30 on the East Coast. So again, thank you to everyone for your perseverance, your stamina. Again, if you have better ideas about when this would work within your schedule, I would love to hear it because I do want to maximize our participation. And I'm sure if you have kids, this is very difficult for you to do. So thank you so much again to everyone. If you have any questions, my email is sgenescale@narprail.org. I will try to send out the presentation tonight along with some of the key links and the requests for action. And thank you to everyone. I really appreciate it.